Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. I'm here sporting my lockdown haircut. I'm afraid to try to cut it myself, and I don't even mind longer hair, but it tends to grow out, not just longer. So like it curls up and I have this giant Q-tip head looking thing. So I don't know, excuse how silly I look, and hopefully barbershops will open up kind of relatively soon here. But anyway, regardless of my silly haircut aside, let's jump into the Q&As. First up is a comment from 2 weeks ago over on Floatplane that I totally missed. I actually found kind of a quirk with Floatplane in that if I load a video real quick, don't see any comments and close it, they don't pop up. You have to leave the video open and it takes like 5 or 6 seconds for the comments to pop up. So I did check it last week and I didn't see a comment. I moved on, and then when I went back to load up the Q&A afterwards, I saw it sitting there. So my apologies to Pete, but Pete had a great question, so I definitely wanted to talk about it. He said, I know you have a decent oscilloscope, but I'm looking for a really budget solution to allow me to check RGB and sync levels and maybe calibrate optical drives. I saw someone using a JYE Tech DSO 150 scope to measure the sync level on a Scart cable, but can't find the link now. So I thought I'd ask if you heard of this cheap do-it-yourself kit and had an opinion on it, if it was suitable or not. Do I have any recommendations? So I went through this a few years ago with Steve and Renee, and they told me that you might be able to get readings on cheaper scopes, but it might not be fast enough to get super accurate readings. So we found that $100 OWAN scope that for RGBS worked totally fine. And if you want to test your own at any point, the best thing you could do is load up the HD Retrovision bandwidth test. So that's the white and black vertical stripes that are really close to each other. And if the scope is still able to read that, then it's fast enough. Because essentially with a white and black stripe, white is voltage spiked all the way up and black is voltage striped voltage all the way down. So if it's fast enough to read how quickly that is drawn across the screen, then it's good enough. And that's how we were able to determine the OWAN scope worked well, and that's how we were able to determine a couple of others didn't. I think between all of us, I don't remember exactly which one I tested, but I think it was like a do-it-yourself project scope or something. And I had somebody test it for me and it couldn't read it right. And Steve and Renee had found others over the years that they said didn't work right. So that would definitely be the way to test it. Now, do you really need something that fast? I don't know, but it's my personal opinion that if you were going to spend $75 or $100, I'd rather just know. I'd rather just buy that $100 one knowing that I'm not going to design a board and have the voltages be off because I cheaped out on a scope. Not calling you cheap, just saying my own opinion on this stuff. So excellent question. Check out, I think it's just retrorgb.com/oscilloscope.html. I think I have a link down here as well. Yeah. Oscilloscope, not plural, and I did a video on that OWAN scope as well that should kind of show how to use it and everything. And it's not as nice. You have to use a computer interface. There's no dials right on it or anything like that. But I mean, it's $100 versus whatever that Rigel scope costs, so it's significantly cheaper. Especially if you just use the probe and want to test one pin at a time. It's you don't need to buy any of that extra stuff. Maybe just a T terminator and a 75 ohm BNC coupler, but that's pretty much it. So all the info is in that video. Just for anybody that doesn't want to check the link, just go to YouTube and RetroRGB and OWAN, OWAN, or just retrorgb.com/oscilloscope.html, and that should give you everything that you would need. Okay, now over on Patreon, Lewis F96 says they're currently learning some electronics, and a quick project they want to try out is use an LED that came with a breadboard kit to light up when pressing a button on a NeoGeo pad. I eventually want to use the LED to do some lag tests on my TVs and monitors. However, I'm scared that I might fry my NeoGeo. Does the plus 5 volt from the NeoGeo controller port also require me to use a resistor on the LED, or does the NeoGeo itself regulate the power? So you would absolutely need a resistor on there, and the same board that I've been using to do my lag tests is an open source design. I can't remember who designed it for me. I think Steve might have designed it for me, and then Tien Feng tweaked it just to make it a little easier to install. But you need a couple components. You need 2 resistors and then something else on there. So I'll try to find a link and post it below for you. But I definitely wouldn't just connect an LED up there. I'll try to get a link to OSH Park and post it right in the show notes. But it's a good question. I mean, if you did hook up the LED directly without any of that, I don't know if it would work. And if it hurt anything, it would just hurt the LED itself, not the controller. But good question, and I'll try to get you those links. Bad Reality caught a mistake I made last week, and it's a mistake I make all the time. I was talking about the differences in signal quality, and I meant to say that you'll get a bigger difference going from composite video to S video than you will from S video to component or RGB. So meaning, the difference between S video and RGB, you could notice it, definitely, but it's not going to be so drastic, whereas composite video to S video on a flat panel absolutely would be noticeable. Depending on how good your CRT is and what the signal is. I like all of these signals on a CRT, so strictly in the confines of flat panel gaming. However, last week I said going from S-video to composite. So I say composite or mix up composite and component all the time. Thanks for calling me out on that. I wish there was an easy way to correct it. It's always a bummer on videos versus on actual web pages, because if that was just a page on the site, I would just change it and be done. So not going to re-upload the whole Q&A just for that, but sorry for the bonehead mistake. And definitely pay attention to yourself when you're talking component, composite. So easy to mix those up. Itsumi Mario. I like that. Itsumi Mario. They said during last week's Q&A, TJ asked about a good HDMI switch, and they wanted to recommend one they've been using. It's a little over $200 with shipping, but it seems to work with their entire retro setup, including an OSSC and a whole bunch of other combinations of that. Now, when it comes to switches like this, I haven't seen this exact brand. The brand is Tesla Smart, but I've seen ones that look like this before, and I think what happens is these manufacturers will make them for one company and then just offer them as their product line for other people to do an OEM sale on. So like if I'm a maker of something and I say, hey, I want to sell an HDMI switch too, they could say, all right, well, here's one that we're selling, we'll put your name on it, change the color of the case, whatever else. So it doesn't, I haven't used this one. Maybe it's different on the inside. The only thing I would point out that it says it's only 4K 30. So while you could use this for all retro and everything up until the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, just wanted to make sure to put that out there, that it doesn't say it's rated at 4K 60. Maybe it is, and they just used the wrong logo or something. That's totally plausible. But thank you very much for the suggestion. I'm always looking for a newer and better HDMI switch. And I guess this one comes with a remote as well, in case you do want to manually switch inputs. Another question from Bad Reality. In the giveaway videos, I see many people typing giveaway with quotation marks, and sometimes I see them spell giveaway capitalized. I sometimes see it spelled as a standalone sentence with a period at the end. Do any of these variations matter to the randomized selector you use? No. Excellent question. I did test this. Not only does that not matter, if you type giveaway once or if you type giveaway 1,000 times in the same comment, doesn't matter. It only just detects one per comment like that. And it filters out doubles as well. So if one person posts individually 100 times, it only counts as one. So it actually is pretty good. I think they designed the randomizer as good as you could ask for something like that. Excellent question, but I did test because I was afraid there was going to be some kind of weird loophole. Now, obviously, if you misspell giveaway, that's a different story. But capitalizations, where it is in the sentence, how many times you post, it doesn't matter. Everybody just gets one entry as long as it's spelled correctly. Shurjar said they have a Scart switch they just got, and it made their experience more seamless than ever, but now they have a problem. The G-Scart switch has 2 outputs, but they need more than that because they run everything through to their FrameMeister and have an OSSC on the way, and I would assume also to an RGB monitor. Are there any low-noise Scart splitters that you would recommend? So I think there's one I just saw on the Shmups forum that's just a splitter, 1 in, 2 out. There's a few other ways to do this manually if you want to make your own or something like that. You could use a breadboard. But if you're using an RGB monitor, one trick I've always used is take the G-Scarts, switch one of their outputs from a Scart to BNC cable into the monitor, and then get a second Scart to BNC cable to go out of the monitor into the OSSC, and that should take care of everything. That way you have your extra. If you're a professional streamer, Or if you're doing like side-by-side comparison video captures for a video or something like that, unplug the RGB monitor and go direct just to make sure there isn't a difference. But for average use, I don't think there's any problem at all, and it should be completely safe to daisy chain that way. So that would be my first suggestion. If you really need extra outputs, there's different ways you could go about doing this. You could get like an Extron switch, just a cheap one, not to replace the G-Scart, but on the output side. If you just search on eBay, they're matrix switches. So very often you might see them with only 1 or 2 inputs, or like 4 inputs, but 8 outputs, something like that. You could also just search for like an Extron distribution amplifier. The only thing is when you use stuff like that, well, 2 things. Anything you put in the chain of an analog signal will lower its quality. Now, it might lower it so imperceptibly small that you'll never notice, or you might notice it, but that's only one way to find out, really. And also, those Extron devices usually output high voltage sync on the outputs, so you'll need to make sure to get a BNC to Scart cable for both the FrameMeister and the OSSC that has a resistor on the sync line that drops that sync level back down to safe. So I would start by kind of looking at your setup and seeing if there's anything you could daisy chain that way. And if not, then I would look into like any cheap used Extron equipment on eBay, so you don't have to spend a lot of money. Or if you like tinkering, you could probably make your own with a THS amp, because all of them support dual outputs. So you could do like a THS 7374, leave the low pass filter off, and then have 2 outputs going to it. And with just a small bit of circuitry, you could probably make your own for that one, or try to find one of the ones that I think the new one just came out on Shmups. I haven't tested it yet. It looks way more complicated than it needs to be, but apparently a lot of engineering went in there, so it seems to be good enough. But I would just start with trying to daisy chain anything first, just to save you money. Rick says, will you be doing anything for the Long Island Retro Gaming Convention this summer? I really enjoyed meeting you and watching your presentation last year, and now that this year it's only online, I'm hoping you'll still be a participant. Nice meeting you as well, Rick. I always love hanging out and meeting people there. And yes, I got an email from Ryan, one of the people that runs it, asking if I'd be a part of it, and I responded immediately and said the answer is yes to anything you have to ask. I'm a giant fan of the convention. I like Ryan a lot. I think he was treated me really well, so I want to stand by them and try to do anything I can to help. And I don't, I mean this respectfully, I don't care what I do. Like, if they tell me to jump on and just talk about stuff for a couple hours, it's no problem. I'll grab a 6-pack, do a live stream. If they want me to do a virtual presentation, I can do that too. I really don't care. I want to do whatever they would like me to do, just so I could help out. I've been trying to help keep a lot of these physical things alive by helping promote and talk about the past 3 months, and I really hope that they're all going to come back strong. And I think they kind of will, because I think after being cooped up for so long, people are really going to want to jump back into things. Maybe not right at first. Some people, I think, might be cautious, but I think we'll start to see this stuff happening again, probably all rescheduled for next year. But I'm really looking forward to it, because live events are probably one of my top 5 favorite things to do involving the website and RetroRGB in general. Kelv SYC had a question about the Dreamcast, and I think it's easier to just skip the question and just answer it. Basically, the question was regarding the output of the Dreamcast and why some solutions either only output 480p or have a switch to select between 15 kilohertz and 31 kilohertz. And the answer is because that is a physical pin switch on the output of the Dreamcast itself. So I think it's 2 pins that are jumped together to enable one mode or the other, and that's why it can't be automatic switching from the output. I think there would have to be a lot of logic built into that, and it would probably be a device that you would probably have to do some kind of internal mod, and at that point just use the DC digital anyway. And the DC digital should do all of that stuff for you. You could set it into auto mode, and it'll automatically just have everything forced to 480p. I think the only time you have to change any settings or anything like that is when you want to specifically use one of the other modes. I went over that in the DC digital video I did. It's been over a year though, so I forgot some of that. But yeah, your question about why is there laser switch, is that a limitation of the hardware? The answer is yes, it is a limitation of the hardware, and I don't think it would be possible to do auto switching and without an internal mod, and at that point, just get the DC digital. Brento wanted to know what I suggested for digitizing VHS tapes, and there's a few solutions. First, if you want the best of the best for something that's super, super important to you, that you want to make sure that you could get the best quality possible, which is still not going to be perfect, but the Doomsday Duplicator project, no doubt. That's it. I don't want to go too much into it because I'll talk for an hour about how much I love the project, but it's basically a way to scan every single bit of the tape itself. And I'm going to use a terrible analogy here, but it's almost like taking a high resolution photo of every tiny little bit of the tape and then running that through a software that then, watches it and transfers it to digital that way. So it's expensive, it's a lengthy process. Excuse my terrible analogy for that, but it's not watching the video per se, as it's trying to take all of the data off of that magnetic tape as possible. And, if there is anything that's super important to you, especially if you're a content creator, if you find something that, there was somebody a few months ago that bought the rights to a TV show and all they had was the VHS tapes, but it was the first master off of that tape. So that would be perfect. But if you're just talking about, I have an old camcorder movie, it doesn't really matter the quality of it because it still looks like crap no matter what. There's a few different ways. You mentioned the video from Technology Connections, and that video is definitely correct. The funny thing is that piece of junk scaler that he uses in the video, that is terrible for video games because it doesn't scale it correctly, it adds a ton of lag, and it treats 240p as 480i. But none of those things matter for VHS tapes. So it's actually a pretty quick and dirty solution. So if you have just a decent capture card and you want a very cheap way to take a tape that you own and, make it digital, that's perfectly fine. I actually prefer a slight step between that. My preference is to use the RetroTink 2X Pro in pass-through mode and then record to my Epiphan DVI to USB 3.0 in 480i. So it just takes the original signal, it uses the digitization of the RetroTink, and that's pretty much it. So it's a good image. If I wanted to deinterlace, I could do software deinterlacing, or I could just watch it. If your capture card doesn't accept 480i over HDMI, which I think most have some sort of issue with that, or they try to deinterlace it themselves or whatever it is, you could set the comb filter to whichever one your eyes prefer, and then also turn on the regular smoothing filter. And that is a pretty good job. I think I prefer that over any kind of weirdness of the, if your capture card doesn't handle 480i correctly, and I prefer that over using that cheap composite to HDMI adapter. I think that's a pretty good look. But once again, your content is going to determine what that is. So an old cartoon you love versus a home movie versus something else, you have to just watch it with your eyes first to really see what the difference is, and just kind of see what looks better to you, and maybe play it back, a snippet of it on a few displays, and be happy with it that way. But those are the three, from the absolute best to cheap and dirty to RetroTink being a somewhere in the middle solution. And then of course, if you're doing any capture, a VHS player, a better quality VHS player is another topic of discussion I get into all the time with people. Some people prefer certain model Sony VHS players with a Furuja not scaler, but video processor built in. And I find that kind of smooths the image out a little bit, but depending on your display, it might actually make it look better. Other people prefer the JVC players that have S-video output, and it's not... You're gaining the performance there because you're not using a composite video cable. The longer a cable, the more interference, especially with composite video. So I think it does the YC separation close to the tape on the board, so there's less. It does make a difference. You're not getting fake S video out of a composite video encoded tape, but just because of the way the signal is transmitted, you will see a small difference. So it's really what your eyes prefer. I used to have a really good VHS player. I had a couple of them, and I had to sell a few of them. So I don't ever really use it, but there have been a few occasions where somebody found like a tape of a deceased relative and they really wanted to digitize it and keep it forever. So what I would ask to do is like, hey, bring 2 tapes, bring another tape that's like not as important but shot by the same video camera, and let's watch, or let's record that 4 or 5 different ways, just a 1-minute snippet. Pick which looks best to you, and then we'll take the important tape last and do it that way. So it really just depends how deep you want to get into this stuff. There's also a long rat hole you could fall down of, do you need to put a time-based corrector in there as well? I mean, there's just a ton of stuff that you could deal with if you really wanted to. But I think for your average person, the stuff that I just mentioned, grab any VHS player that you know works, test it with another tape before you put your important one in there, and then either buy the cheap scaler or the RetroTink. And that should be an easy decision. Do you need, or would you use a RetroTink 2X at all for any other reason? And if the answer is no, just get the cheap one, Technology Connections used. If the answer is yes, I would always just get the RetroTink. So hopefully that points you in the right direction. Michael Vu wants to know if I think the mode will be worth the extra price over the Fenrir. They want to hold out for this satiator, but I have no idea when it comes out. No one does. How much it'll cost, what features it'll have. Yeah, I think Professor Abrasive really dropped the ball with that project big time. It's real. It exists. It's not vaporware. I think if he had finished that a year ago, he'd rule the market on this, whereas there are excellent alternatives. As my opinion for the mode to the Fenrir goes, very easy answer for you there. Check to see if the mode offers a feature or something that the Fenrir doesn't. See if that's important to you. If not, if you just want to play games and you don't care about any extra features, you make sure the Fenrir is compatible with your Saturn, because it's only compatible with 20-pin. And then decide what your storage wants to be. So do you want to take one card or one drive and have the entire Saturn library on it, every game from all regions just to have it on there? You can get a 1 terabyte SSD and a mode for cheaper than a 1 terabyte micro SD and a Fenrir. So that's, and the opposite, if you just want to grab a cheap 16 gig card and only load your favorite games on it, the Fenrir is going to be much cheaper. So just think about it from that point of view, what the cost of storage, any extra feature the mode has, which I don't want to comment until I try one myself. It looks awesome, but I just, from a point of view of playing a game, I'm not sure what else it would offer. And of course, compatibility, that's the one big thing. If you don't have a 20-pin Saturn, you're kind of stuck with the mode. So excellent question, and I think it really should just be a setup and feature compatibility thing. But hopefully you'll be able to make your decision based on those. Alexander Alvarado had a few questions. The first is regarding OSSC compatibility. They wanted to know if there's any devices out there that increase compatibility with TVs, and the DVDO line of products are the only ones that I've personally used. There's a bunch of different models that'll work. Video Game Perfections Forum, I think, talked about it in detail, and I think a bit on the Shmups Forum as well. And it makes compatibility 100%. You have to make sure it's on a certain firmware, and you turn cadence detection off. There's a very specific thing you got to do. It's all available, I believe, on the Video Game Perfection Forum. But that makes compatibility 100%. And the DVDO boxes add some pretty cool features as well. There's some other scaling things it could do. They have a great deinterlacing option in there for games. There's actually a few options. The regular Game Mode 1, which is Bob deinterlacing, is less than a frame of lag. Now, please don't quote me on these, because I haven't measured the DVDO in a while, and I want to remeasure it with the Time Sleuth to be sure. But I'm pretty sure the 480i Bob deinterlacing is less than 1 frame, and they have Game Mode 2, which is less than 2 frames of lag, I think, that actually does a great job deinterlacing. You don't get any flicker. It looks as good or better than most TVs deinterlacer for games, probably better in most cases. So something like that might be worth it if any of the other things I mentioned to you kind of stand out. But that's the only device I've personally tested. Now, you mentioned an Extron DSC 301 HD. I've never used that one, but I do know that some Extron scalers do add a bunch of lag to it because it's not designed for video games. So I don't know about that one in particular. You would have to use it with a Time Sleuth to see. But the good news is a lot of TVs are getting much better with compatibility, which leads me to your second question. How do I feel about OLED TVs? Do I think it's worth it overall? It looks like you're worried about image retention and burn-in. So, you got to see it with your own eyes and see if it's worth it to you. I know a lot of people that are not into AV at all. They're not enthusiasts of this stuff. They could care less, but they take one look at an OLED and they go, that's better. I like that. Whereas I know people who just, their eyes don't see a noticeable difference to justify the price. The only things I will add to that, though, image retention happens all the time and immediately goes away. So you'll see, like if you have a black screen with white letters and then it'll go to another screen and you might see it for a few seconds and then it goes away. I would never worry about image retention. And while it will scare you if you spend a lot of money on an OLED, it'll definitely scare you the first few times you see it. Don't just put it out of your mind. Don't worry about it. As for burn-in, though, if you're somebody that has like CNN on all day long and shit like that, or if you're using it as a computer monitor, then I would not recommend it. Because for me personally, I leave my desktop computer monitor on. Like I turn it on when I wake up, I turn it off before bed, and it's on all day, so I constantly have access to it. That's not good for an OLED, and that would result in burn-in that's not fixable. So, money. Check it out. See if your eyes think it's worth it to you for the extra money, and then just my thoughts on burn-in versus image retention. And as far as compatibility goes, it's the compatibility with my OLED TV is pretty good. I had mine's from 2016, I believe, and the last firmware update added lag and hurt compatibility. I don't know what's up with that. So that's the only other suggestion is if you find a TV that is compatible and looks good and has low lag, wait for somebody else to upgrade the firmware before you do it, just in case they screw it up like LG did on mine. Jason Guffey said they're just getting into soldering, but their hands have always been a little on the shakier side. Do I have any advice? No, and it makes it rough because there was a few times I woke up with, a bad cold or something and I wasn't feeling well and I was a little jittery myself, and maybe just posture and positioning. It was one, and it's going to sound off topic, but I'll come back to it, I promise. When I was recording the album like 5 years ago, I had a friend of mine who's pretty big into music, but never recorded anything come and help. He kind of just wanted to see the process. And I was sitting down recording a few parts on guitar, and then I stood up because I'm just kind of stiff from sitting down. And he was like, "Whoa, everything's better now that you're standing up." What are you talking about? He goes, as soon as you start standing up, your posture is different, everything's different, and the notes are sounding better. So I imagine that posture and comfort has a lot to do with it. So try a standing desk, try a more comfortable chair, try an adjustable height desk, and maybe there's a position you could sit in that'll be more comfortable so that it'll take the pressure off. Now, I'm half talking from experience and half talking out of my ass on that one, but I just felt like it was worth sharing that just in case it might help. You probably already tried that. Your other questions are about using a cheap iron and other rookie mistakes to watch out for. Definitely don't skimp on a cheap soldering iron, but you don't have to spend $1 million. The one that Voltar did the video on, the Kescher, Ksger T12. I'm looking at it in front of me now. There's links on my Amazon page for it, which is linked in the description. That's like $50, and the tip that it comes with is perfectly fine. I used that for a long time, and when the new tips I ordered came in, I switched them out when I specifically needed something else, but the one that it came with did such a good job that I just always use that. Also get really good iron cleaner. I think I have, or tip cleaner or something. I think I have that linked as well. The Heiko one on Amazon's cheap. They wear out kind of quick. There's more expensive ones that my buddy John told me about that the model number on it is CSI-08C. Once again, sitting right in front of me. I'm not sure where to get those, but that seemed to last a lot longer, but it was more expensive, I think. So keep the iron very clean. Don't skimp out, but you don't have to spend $1 million. $50 will get you all you need. And that's pretty much it. I mean, just check the tools section on the website and the Amazon store, and you should be able to get yourself started with quality stuff for less than $100. And you don't have to worry about too much stuff. Just decent tip and keep it clean all the time, and you should be okay. And your last question is about a Y cable. You said how feasible would it be to make a Y cable that's plug and plug, not plug and receptacle, so that you could go mono on one side and and then have it out to stereo on your TV or something. You could easily make one of those, and I'm pretty sure you could buy those as well. You just gotta, Amazon searching gets a little weird for stuff like that, so you'll search and have to go 2 pages deep before you find what you want. I, in fact, just did this on TRS to receptacle RCA adapters. So I would just search through Amazon, but I guarantee that exists, and it's probably not going to be expensive. And as Steve taught us in the last oscilloscope video, that is perfectly safe to do, using a Y cable for audio, not video, out from a Nest to a TV that has both left and right audio. Bad Reality wanted to know if the original generation of virtual reality games are preserved via emulation on modern VR platforms. So that's probably a better question for somebody like Kevin Mellett. I know for sure there's a bunch of emulation options on there, but that's something that I really hope people will start to put some serious effort into. Because even with the Virtual Boy, it's expensive and complicated to refurbish a Virtual Boy. I really do enjoy the experience a lot, though. But I think for people to just feel what the games are like in 3D, a really good Virtual Boy emulator on like the Oculus Rift or something would probably be perfectly fine. It'll be all red. It won't be the same exact look, but at least you'd be able to experience the 3D. So that's absolutely something I hope people spend some time on in the future, but I just don't know enough about VR stuff to give you a better answer than I hope it'll happen someday. Kirk says they're looking at a Street Fighter EX2 board arcade machine with a CRT at a reasonable price, and they want to know how difficult it is to swap games with these, and if there are any boards that are similar to the EverDrives. Is it a matter of just unplugging a board and plugging a new one in? So I've never seen a Street Fighter EX2 arcade machine in person, and I'm not sure what platform it's run off of. So if it's got a JAMA standard in there, then it should be as easy as unplugging and replugging. Definitely double check that though. If it's like the JNX standard or other stuff like that, you would require a converter, but it should be fairly easy to wire up. Or if it's just completely custom, who knows, you might have to spend some time on it. But if it's a game you like and it's got a CRT in it that's in very good condition with no burn-in, and you said it's a reasonable price, maybe pick it up and go from there, and just know that anytime you go down the road of arcade machines, it could end up being a lot more work than anticipated. But at the very least, if you love that one game, then you get that one machine for your collection. As far as are there any multi-boards for it, some arcade platforms have multis, but not all. So I have the Darksoft CPS2 multi. My friend Beast has a bunch of multis for all of the different platforms that are out there. So you would just have to look up the arcade platform it runs on and see if there's a multi for that. Some are a lot more complicated than others. Some you just install and you select the game with an LCD. Others have a menu. Others you would actually have to have a Raspberry Pi and a network boot setup like with the Naomi. So I would just research that specifically. And you mentioned you were given a Pandora's box with HDMI and the whole setup is pretty rubbish. Yes. Yes, it is. So is the one that came with an arcade machine. I'll have the video out on that in a week or so, but the arcade machine that I have at home had a NeoGeo emulation board in it. That was so bad, like an early revision Raspberry Pi 2 worked better. So yeah, definitely not a fan of the Pandora's boxes. They're just, the sound emulation's way off. They're super laggy. Just not, I would much prefer an arcade 1-up over that. I guess that's the best way to put it. Alex Shamai says they're getting more input lag when their original Xbox is set to 720p versus 480p when playing on a 4K TV. They've only tested Crash Nitro Kart so far, but it's definitely noticeable. I'm really curious what's going on with your setup, because now that I have a Time Sleuth, which is very accurate, I have seen certain TVs, and especially certain scalers, that add more or less lag per resolution, but it's always very, very minimal. And the only real difference in most cases are interlaced versus progressive. So some TVs automatically, when you set it to game, or when you set it to game mode, will automatically switch to Bob D interlacing, which is very fast. But most TVs, when it's 480i or 1080i, will add a ton of latency, 3 to 5 frames over a progressive signal. So 480, 720, 1080p. But you're saying, 720 versus 480p. If it's only one game, maybe it's a game issue. I would definitely try more than one and see, but that's a good question. And I'm really interested if that's like where the root of that is. Is that input lag from the controller? Is the Xbox getting maxed out in processing power going into 720p? It's a really good question. I just, you'd have to test a bunch of different games, and you would have to have some pretty good measurement tools in order to get real precise measurements. So curious about that one, but sorry, I don't really have anything to offer. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much to everybody who participates. I really do enjoy doing these. And if you're new to it, ask any question you have wherever it is that you support in the latest support post. It's just kind of hard to go through all the rest of them, and I have to have YouTube comments turned on because of the algorithm. But respectfully, this is just a thank you and an interaction between myself and people that support. I spend a probably unhealthy amount of time answering questions on other YouTube videos, but this is really just a thanks to everybody that supports. So any questions you have as a supporter, please just go to wherever the support page is, go to the newest one, and ask your question there. And if for whatever reason I miss it, it's always an accident. Please just re-ask it next week. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.